Okay, so a very warm welcome and good morning, everyone, dear participants. Welcome to our session. My name is Tommi Vollmann. I work as a project manager at atene in Berlin, and I'm happy to be your moderator today in this session. And this session is all about exploring how the digital transformation and the sustainable development of cities and regions can go hand in hand and support each other. And we are very glad to have 4 distinguished speakers and 2 distinguished session hosts with us today. And the speakers, they represent the perspective of both cities and local authorities on the one hand, and of academia on the other hand. So I'm sure we will have interesting, inspiring discussions with them, but also with you as participants. So we really encourage you to make active use of the chat, of the wall of ideas in this mobile event app during our session, and we will also have some interactive votings with you during one of our talks. Before I introduce the first speaker, I would like to give the word to Liz Price for some opening remarks. Liz is a senior research fellow at Lincoln International Business School in the UK, and she's specialized in research on local and regional economic development. And I'm happy that she's also one of our chairs today of this session. So Liz, the floor is yours. Liz, please remember to unmute your mic.
Sorry. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Tommi, and welcome to this session. As Tommi said, I'm the co-chair of this session, along with Peyman Khodabakhsh from atene in Berlin, who will conclude the session with some overall remarks from the presentations that we have seen today. As Tommi said, really the focus of this session is the potential for digitalization to bring about economic, environmental and social benefits to all areas of regions. And we know that digitalization can provide the opportunity to facilitate development and reduce disparities between rural and urban areas of a region. For rural businesses, for example, it can facilitate access to new markets, the development of new business models and more efficient use of resources. And we know that innovations in transport can help reduce carbon emissions and enable provision of services that are more demand responsive to the needs of different communities. And recently we've seen that remote working has the potential to revitalise the economies of rural areas and smaller towns. And we've seen that COVID really has brought about a renewed interest in rural living, which really is dependent upon digital connectivity and digital skills. But despite the potential of this digital technology, we know that a number of factors can mitigate that, and that there is a risk that digitalization can actually reinforce existing disparities. So we know that broadband infrastructure is slow to diffuse into some rural areas, creating a digital divide. We know that even where available, adoption of digital technology can be slowed by a lack of digital skills in the workforce, a reluctance to innovate, fear of technology, and concerns around data sharing. And we know that implementing innovations in transport require political foresight, and effective partnership working, and crucially, sufficient investment. So we're really pleased to welcome our 4 speakers to this session who'll discuss some of these issues in more detail. Firstly, I would like to welcome Helena from Albertslund Municipality in Denmark, who's going to talk to us about how digitalization can support sustainable solutions in cities using smart city partnership approach. So I will hand over to you, Helena.
Thank you very much. And I'll just share with you. Full screen. Yeah. Thank you very much. As Liz said, I'm Helene Kvist. I work in a Danish city called Albertslund as a smart city coordinator. And I'll talk about how smart city partnerships can create sustainable solutions. At least we do our best. And I'll briefly say a bit about what is a smart city, because it's still a bit fluffy for a lot of people, and also how we approach this in Albertslund, which we do through living labs and a lot of different partnerships and triple helix innovation. And in the end, I'll also give some examples of these partnerships and what we are aiming for. And just to give you a small idea about where we are in the world, Albertslund is just right outside of Copenhagen, the Danish capital, but it's a very small municipality with only 28,000 inhabitants. But still, it's actually quite known in Denmark for always pushing sustainable urban development. And we also have a strong tradition for prioritizing citizen involvement. But we are a small city, and that's why we sort of need the cities around us and to have strong partnerships. But just to start with, so what is a smart city? Usually when you Google it, it looks like this. You'll have a lot of futuristic high-rises, and it's usually dense populated cities, and everything is connected, and sort of this network is creating the whole city. And my point today is that, well, one of them is that it can also look like this. This is actually right outside of Albertslund, and the whole point in this is to say you can't actually see the difference, but this is a very, if you can use the word smart junction. But the smart thing is that we have a lot of different stakeholders, the Danish road directory and the two municipalities meeting and the private companies owning all of the technology. And when you gather data from all of these different stakeholders, and that's not an easy task, I should say, but if you do that, and if the stakeholders are willing to open up about their data and you can actually get them together, then you actually all of a sudden can make a huge change. Because now, because the sensors all the time measure how much traffic are there, then during this pilot, the speed during this morning rush hour actually increased a lot, 18%, and also the unexploited time were reduced by 20, actually 1/5 percent, which is quite a lot, where you don't have to sit in your car and waste your time, basically. And very important also, of course, it has a lot of effect on the CO2 emissions. So it's just to have an example of this is a smart city, but you really need to know it before you see it. And it's the same with waste management. The square is down in the corner. That's waste bins, and it's a way of showing how much are they full or should they be emptied. And the same idea here is if you have real-time information about the need for, in this case, empty the dumpsters, then you have to actually do the effort according to that. And obviously, if you're visiting every empty dumpster because they have a fixed schedule, then you use a lot of unnecessary CO2 emission on that. So it makes sense that you go for the ones that actually needs to be emptied. And again, it's the same things that we've always done in a municipality as with the waste management. Here is another example with the smart city technology and the sensors and the data. They're basically just another tool for the same task that we've always had to do. usually before we would measure the bicycles and pedestrians and so on by doing it manually. So we would have a person maybe once a year, more persons, but people actually standing outside in the city and counting how many bicycles do we have on this road. And obviously we have these, I guess you've all seen these stands that sort of counts the bicycles, but we don't have that on every road and every corner in the city. So this tool, to your right, is an example of how that can be done, because now we have this real-time data. This is something we're testing in our living lab together with Telia, and it's a tool that can show us the actual flow of the city. So where do people come from? Where do they go? And for how long do they stay? During this pandemic, of course, we could see our parks being used much more than they usually are. And also, if we do some work around the city, we have, let's say we are closing a road because we have some work that we need to do, then before we would assume that that would have a change in the flow of the city, but now we can actually go and see right away, okay, so what is the effect of this change that we are doing? And obviously our urban planners can use this also for so how do people actually use our city, and do we see that one part of the city is very popular, then let's go and sort of well, make it even better, or put up more waste bins if that's what's needed. But at least this is very different from waiting a whole year to get that information, and now we can sort of follow it along. And the Albertslund approach, I've called it that because, again, we are a small city, and we very much depend on good partnerships and doing innovation through collaboration with all of these different stakeholders. And we do that in our living lab, and the living lab is called DOL, Danish Outdoor Living Lab. And we have a lot of testing, and that's where we sort of have our platform for doing triple helix innovation, which of course is the public and the private and the universities together. And at DOL we measure a lot of things, and we test waste management, mobility solutions, measure things like road temperature, noise, particulate pollution with different sensors. And measuring in real time, as I mentioned before, the previous slide, it gives us very new possibilities for adapting activities to the current conditions. So that could be directing traffic away from a cloudy area, or you can adjust snow clearance, salt distribution to match the actual road temperature, and not just put salt everywhere because it's -1 degrees. So it has a lot of great ways of reaching these environmental goals that we have in the municipality. And it also provides value information about how we organize our infrastructure. And I would say this sort of benefits the citizens as well, that we can sort of adjust the city to the citizens' needs. And the DOL Living Lab is part of this non-profit, you could call it innovation hub, called Gate 21, and they are situated in Albertslund. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is that at least for Denmark, with a lot of small cities, this is very important for us to sort of have this platform to sort of have these triple helix projects, because what they do is also that they help us find funding from both regional and from EU, and they sort of work as a secretariat for the projects. So we make sure that we deliver the things that we should, but also to actually have this network of just people, because again, it's very much about the people. The technology is only as good as the people using it. So what we use these partnerships for is basically to have a lot of workshops and talk about how we approach these technologies, because the technologies will be there anyways. So it's, for us as municipalities, it's extremely important to be part of that development and have a say in that development. Not that I don't trust the private company, but obviously we as a municipality have our citizens in mind and sort of have that approach to these technologies. And I think that's very important to do that collaboration together. So we sort of help each other and that we're heading the same direction. Maybe not the whole country, but at least our region. So we have a lot of projects, and I've taken a few with me today. I'll just go through them, because the examples to begin with was very local examples of smart city, where this is more about the partnerships across the region. And this is sort of what I was talking about before, about the whole having the right competencies, you say that, yeah, in the municipality, because the technologies are just, well, they have a full speed going on, but it's the same people working in the municipalities. It's the same people doing the maintenance, as it were, before all of these sensors and the whole smart grid arrived. So there's a lot of work in sort of well, getting the same language, if you can say that, around these things, and have this slow but very, very important curve going up that the people know. So what is, when I say IoT, Internet of Things, what is that actually? And it's very important to go out and actually test it together and see, okay, this is how it works. So we did that at 23 municipalities together. And what was very interesting here was that one of the cities in this has this living lab called Smart Village, Svebølle. And what we learned was that even though the very dense populated cities and the rural areas came together in this project, we actually saw that very often we had the same issues around our cities, and the same challenges. So that could be cloudburst or energy efficient LED lighting. Could be well organized public transportation. I mean, if you're small in a small or a big city, that's still something you would want for your citizens. And the technologies are pretty much the same. Obviously, it's a different scale if you're a Copenhagen or if you're a Svebølle, as it is here in the Smart Village. But it still needs a network. It still needs some sensors, and we need to test the sensors before we have them in our whole city. So we learned a lot from each other, and I think for the Danish cities, at least, that was a real important eye-opener. And then I've chosen Link, and that's about autonomous shuttles, and it's actually the largest test. And Albertslund is a lead municipality, but again, it's this triple helix project with both municipalities, and we have private companies such as IBM, and we have 2 universities. And what's very interesting for me here is that these 2 universities, big universities in Denmark, they have very different fields of sciences. So you have the technical university, and you have the anthropological approach. Because what's interesting in this project is actually not testing the technology itself, because again, that will come, and the private market is gonna push that. I'm sure of that. But we as a municipality, and if we want to say in this, and if we want to follow this this development, we should work together with the private companies. So it's interesting. It's actually not the technology, but everything around it. So the urban planning and how do people approach this? Are they afraid? Do they want to jump on board and all of that? Which is the university's approach. So we have very different goals, I would say, all of us in this project, but basically the important thing is that we push it in the same direction, and we as a municipality all of a sudden can have a say in a very fast moving technology. And this project is about lighting. It was also a huge project, and it's been followed by this one called Lighting Metropolis, Green Economy. And to begin with, it was only called Lighting Metropolis, and it was a huge living lab in the greater Copenhagen region, where we were testing all kinds of things. And the universities helped with the latest technologies, testing it, and they made these LED life cycle reports. So we made sure that it actually was sustainable, and we had we sort of made this whole ecosystem of projects that should sort of learn from each other, and I think it's interesting to see how actually EU funded 0.2, so that's the green economy, because the next sort of important thing is the whole the green agenda. So not only changing to LED, but also making sure to check the life cycles if that's possible, and again learn from each other and learn from academia. And what's interesting here is that, of course, all of the cities know how to install LED lighting. They should know that, but when you sort of have this cross-border cooperation, all of a sudden you get a lot of shared knowledge and the latest solutions, and it just goes much faster that way. So there is a goal of switching a lot of lighting to LED. And then I want to just try, and these were quite big projects, but in our own small backyard, we are also trying to make sure to make use of the technology when we are trying to reach our goals. We've just put out a climate action plan, and it's out for consultation these weeks, and we have a lot of these goals that directly aim of using new technologies, and not that the technology, again, it cannot stand alone, and it's not that we should just wait for the right technologies to come, but we want to use this living lab method to sort of see, so how far is the market now, and can we actually do projects like the waste management or the salt on roads or whatever that can sort of help us going in the right direction. And we, of course, as many others, has the Sustainable Development Goals, and we have that in our smart city, you say, working paper as well. But how do we actually show that our smart city based projects are getting anywhere, and are they actually reaching these goals? So we are trying to do that via a platform, and we've seen that in Ålesund. And bear with me now, I know it looks a bit confusing when you see it at first, but just to have an example here, you put it a bit closer, and the environmental part of it, then for us, this could be, if you see all of these, just like with waste, you have noise, what do you call it? The noise quality, if you can say that, and the public building as well. That's subjects we are spending a lot of time and getting these sensors and data to give us a lot of information about how are we doing in this. And this could be a way of showing all year around in real time. So how far are we from our goal? Because one thing is that that you can once a year get a report, but if you want to sort of, I mean, we are in a hurry to be more sustainable, all of us. So we want to make sure that we all the time can have this real time idea of how far are we actually from reaching these goals. So in the end, I would say that smart city technologies are basically just tools to do the same thing as we've always been doing. But now we have these large amounts of communication data and also between the sectors, which give us completely new ways of maintaining our city. And in that way, it can enhance livability quite a lot, I would say, if you know how to use these technologies correct. And obviously also improve the everyday maintenance, because we know exactly where we should put our attention and make something work, because we can see it right away. We don't have to wait a year to get that knowledge. And in that way, I would say it can be a great tool for reaching our goal for being a sustainable city, which we very much hope will end up as. And other than that, I'll just say thank you very much. And if you have any questions, let me know. You're very welcome to write me an email as well if something pops up. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Helene, for this talk and for these inspiring insights. For me, one key takeaway is you said the smart city is not the technology, it's everything around it. I would like to pick up some questions from the chat and pass them on to you. First of all, we have a question from Rainer Bolduan asking, could digitalization have an impact on the interlinkage between urban and rural areas? What would you
I would
on
say
that?
yes. And I think it also depends on where you are in the world. But in Denmark, I can always speak for my behalf, and we're quite a small country. And here it has so much potential, because if you have, let's say, just the mobility and people going from one city to another, if you imagine having all of these, like the shuttle I mentioned, and then you'll have an electronic scooter, and then you'll have an S-train. If all of these things have to talk together, it goes across the borders, and that could be also. Well, the people collecting waste, they don't do it in one municipality, they do it in more municipalities. So we need the technologies to talk together in all of these municipalities, and there could be much bigger examples too. But the main thing is that we don't see it as citizens, but there is small systems, sensors, networks in all of these cities. And right now they don't talk to each other. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes for people like me to get these things to sort of match, because then it really becomes smart, I would say, or sustainable at least. I hope that was an answer.
Thank you. Maybe one more question before we move on to the next speaker. Peyman Khodabakhsh was inspired by the example projects you mentioned and is wondering, how did you identify these priority areas for smart solutions in your city? Could you maybe enlighten us on that one as well?
I actually think that's a very important question, because what we don't want to do is to get amazed about a new technology and then we just want to have that in our city. It has to be the other way around. So all of these examples, they came from already existing needs in the city. So that could come from one department working with mobility, or other working with waste. It could be from the citizens also with LED lighting, for example. Our citizens actually want that change. So it's very important to say these needs come from the city, from the people working in the municipality. And if we can have the needs directly from the citizens, that's actually the best, because then we can go out and see what do we have that can help this need and not do it the other way around.
All right, thank you very much once more, Helene. There are some more questions in the chat. Maybe you can also read them there and try to answer them there. But I think with a view to the time, it's indeed time to introduce our next speaker in this panel. Our next speaker is Torben Quickertz. Torben is a policy officer for sustainable mobility in the Ministry of Climate Protection, the Environment, Mobility, Urban and Housing Development, a long title, in the city of Bremen in Germany. And Torben has a background in geography and transport planning, and he's also the coordinator of an Interreg North Sea region project called Automated Road Transport Forum. And his contribution today will be on automated mobility and its implications on sustainable and resilient cities and regions. So we very much look forward to Torben's talk. The floor and the screen is yours, Torben. And to the participants, please remember again to post your questions in the chat. And we will also interrupt Torben's, or not interrupt, but include some votings with you in Torben's contribution. Torben, please, the floor is yours. Sorry, Torben, please unmute your microphone.
Oh. Yeah, thank you, Tommy, for the nice introduction. But the question before, we had some issues in the rehearsal regarding to my presentation. I hope it's working now. At my screen, it's okay, but I don't know.
We can still see the gray boxes. What is with the others? So I might share the presentation on my screen.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay, then we can go on. Janine, you have to be click if I say it maybe, but this could be very difficult, but let's start again. Okay, yes, I'm a EU project coordinator of the Automated Road Transport Forum, and I try to do a right conceptual or more theoretical approach to take a look on how innovation regarding to automated road transport can implement into the society. And therefore, we have to go on because I will start with the question to sensitize you with the topic. And one step back, please. So we have a Mentimeter poll, and so you see this QR code and as well the password to use it. And the question is, what do you think? How will what will the automated road transport? When will it be? Or can you go one slide further, please? So when do you expect integrated autonomous vehicles on the streets? So you have the opportunities between 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or more than 30 years. I'm asking this because this question about these autonomous or automated, because there is a big difference and even a big difference in implementation and recommendation to other public authorities, for example, how they can handle all about this regarding their sustainable mobility plans or regional plan or in a whole in the transport planning. So it's very important that we all have to be very realistic in this case. And I don't know.
Yes, Torben, if you want, I can share the results now.
Yeah. Okay. The most 6 people say that in 20 years we will have these autonomous vehicles. In this context, you have to know that autonomous, and that's a pity about these about this meaning. It means that you don't have a driver, so that you can hand off from the steer, and even only in the autonomous way. In this, you can be very whole integrated in the whole system. So autonomous means to be a lot of transition and a lot of innovation done in the next future. I come back to these results during my presentation. So we can go on with the presentation. Coming back to our project, because what we are doing is very important. How we have to handle and to tackle these implementation of automated road transport. So we are in the North Sea region project. You see, we have a consortium with authorities, with research institutions and universities, and NGOs. So we have this core think tank who's very heterogeneous, and we have so a lot of input from a lot of ways in a lot of other point of views. Next, please. So we have this core think tank, and our overall objectives are the raise awareness among the public stakeholders, so that they know how to tackle with automated transport, and so that we can hand out some policy recommendations, and that we all can this put in the way of future sustainable transport. So we want to raise the voices of the public authorities in this way, because it's very important that the technical developers act with this society, with the planners, because we have no solution afterwards if we don't work together, and the technical things are coming before the society will be integrated or be involved. So then it's too late, and we have maybe no opportunities for whole implementation of automated road transport. Next, please. So what we are doing, we have, for example, this application, the whole technical pilots we are doing, maybe with the self-driving minibuses, and for other things we are working with 5G networks, and even in our partner in Groningen are developing some kind of digital driver license for automated driving. So they're trying to regulate it in the Dutch government, and so yeah, there will be a big impact. Otherwise, we are doing a lot of research on scenario development and social economic impacts about acceptance, inclusion, and all this stuff. And then the next part will be the effects on different areas, on territorial effects of art between urban, inter-urban, or rural areas. Next, please. Before we can go on, I just want to know what, in your opinion, the biggest challenge towards implementation of automated transport will be. After this, I will come to this more in detail in my presentation, but here it's just that you can think about first what is important. We have here this regulation, the technical issues, the acceptance, these things about the ethics, and we take a look. Oh, that's quite sure. You all talking about regulation. Yeah, that's very important, especially here in Germany, where I'm living. Oh, sorry, there come the other results. Yeah, I was talking about the regulation. Yeah, regulation and liability, for example. The safety is one thing, and what is very important for us is this acceptance about the users of automated road transport. How do you see it as well? And the other things about technical issues, the technology and infrastructure and the integration in the traffic is coming behind here in this poll, but it's even equal for the challenges we are tackling. So we can go on, and I will come back with that. Okay. So what I just mentioned, these autonomous, there are so-called SAE levels, where the Society of Social Engineering established this system, how we can see automated transport will be possible in the future. And I already told number 5, the autonomous way is then when you don't need no driver. So at this place, maybe the public transport provider have this business case that they don't need a driver. Before you have to be on the steer, or you have even your mind off, but you have to be every time able to interact. And so that's very important that we have these SAE levels, and today only available is 2, SAE level 2, so partially automated, for example, and in testing now these SAE level 3 and 4. And it's the question is when it will be. So we are talking about here of in round about 40 years that we have autonomous, and the steps before is maybe in 10 years we have these level 4, but we have these issues about the regulations exactly, and all these acceptance and other things I was talking about. So next, please. So now you have to click. When we're talking about embedding in the mobility system, you can go on with the presentation with the animation. We have these steps. We can go on, and maybe we have this integration into the vehicle, into the traffic, and then into the technical traffic system. But this is just the technical way. And after this, we have to go on into the society. So we have to implement it in the mobility system. And after this, we have to involve the stakeholders, and then we have to do this background of the living environment. So please go on with the animation and in all the economic areas. So this approach here is very linear. So there is no back feedback, there is no friction, there is just the technical comes and then the society. But it's very important, and the presentation from Helene and their experience in Arbeitsund is that what you were talking about, that we have for automated rail transport too. So we have to involve the people, and we have to involve other things that is important besides the technical thing. So next, please. I have to. Another approach is about these. When we talk about sustainable mobility, here this approach is about fusion mobility. So I will skip this over, but here it's pronounced that policies need to include the potentials of digitalization, so that sustainable transport for the future has to be digitalized. So that's for sure. And automated road transport on the right is if you see this fusion mobility approach, you see connected mobility and future vehicle. That's automated rail transport. And on the levels, you have, for example, to integrate the public space and shared mobility, because this shared mobility is one of these things you have to be, or they have to use if you can, if you want to use autonomous transport or vehicles in the future, but it will not working out without sharing. Next, please. So my approach is the multi-level perspective, because the integration of autonomous transport is very difficult, and it's important from many views. And this is how we can explain technical transitions come about, and we want to understand the interaction between these actors, environments, and innovations. So on the model, you see the landscapes. That's the exogenous context. They are not that very hard to change. That's maybe, for example, the individualization from people, or the urbanization, and this level of this landscape, so-called landscapes, are interacting with the regimes in the meso level, and there actually the innovations are happening. So there have to be very they are part of this regime with a lot of factors, variables like the science, culture, and so on. And the innovations are coming from the low level, the micro level, the niche. So they're coming from small networks. They are working on with co-creation, for example, autonomous transport, or our project at Forum. And so we are working on to involvement in co-creation and co-construction, and maybe we can be one of these window of opportunity we call. So suddenly it will happen that these radical informations are going into the regimes and happened and will be implementing into the system. Next slide, please. This is an approach on this multi-level perspective of automobility. So we have here this landscapes, for example, with peak oil exchange, climate change, and on the regime we have, for example, the regulation on driving or travel behavior. We see this meaning of cars, but very hard. It's a very hard factor, and when we're talking about new sustainable mobility modes of measures, and the niche for the whole automobility system will here be, for example, this car sharing, battery, or our AV is here for autonomous vehicles. So that is a niche who can have to be break into this regime, but this is a long way. So next, please. There is a further question. So now I already mentioned this territorial effects we have. So I want to give you the chance to elaborate. What do you mean? Where will be the biggest impact of automated mobility in the future in different spatial areas? We coming the results. Yeah, in urban areas, yeah, but in urban areas we have the most challenges and the most obstacles. So we have this one of this so-called disruptive impact that are the pedestrians and the bicycles, because we can be very high connected and full automated, but in this mixed traffic, it's very difficult to integrate the other participants in the traffic system. So we have for the urban areas the most tackles, the most challenges. And for example, in rural areas, we don't know exactly. Maybe they have the best circumstances around testing, because there are not so much obstacles, but we have them more to tackle about these user acceptance and the meaning of cars, for example. And for the interurban areas to be in the interlinkage between urban and rural areas, there could be the automated road transport, a solution for commuters, for example. In this part between inter-regional connections, when you have a separate line where automated road transport can be in the fleet system, in the sharing system, then we have a great impact in these interurban areas. Okay, thank you for this. Next, please. So I think I have to be quick here. Yeah, this is some kind of conclusion we did in our project in the workshop about the expectations on these different levels in 5 or 20 years. And we see for the when I take a look only on the 20 years, that maybe in the automated road, in the automated public transport, it's only possible if we are in the segregated areas with no this mixed traffic, because they're very high. And yeah, I have to go on with this. Another thing to look at is this part of smart mobility. Here is a very interesting study about smart mobility in the Heinsberg region in Germany. It's in North Rhine-Westphalia. It's a multi-level approach as well, and so they try to they ask the actors, and so they come to the conclusion here about smart mobility, about impending factors and promoting factors. And for example, a promoting factor is here the digitalization, so that they see if they can digitalize their region, so they're able to implement more smart mobility. And that's a very good point, like this civil participation on the micro actor area. That's very important that they could be included in all the things too. And here one impending factor is on the macro level, this legislation and infrastructure. So these issues we will have for the automated road transport as well. Next, please. Yeah, so that is my try to adapt this implementing of automated of smart mobility in the region to the automated road transport into the region. And many of these factors are the same, but maybe for micro and actor products, you will see the application and pilots like we are doing. So we have this self-driving vehicles, so that the people can integrate or involve in living next to develop this automated road transport. So then the next step, please. So that might try to adapt these multi-level for the automated mobility. So we have in the landscapes digitalization, for example. It's very important if there is no a whole 5G network, for example. So we don't have to do we don't able to do this in the next future. And we have maybe this pandemic situation, because you can see now in COVID-19 times that we don't have any driver. So maybe you have no driver in pandemic situations, then you have to no contact the whole day with the passengers as bus driver. That could be, for example, effort of this. In the regimes, we have the automotive industry, but additionally the ICT industry. So like Google, Tesla, so they're doing much more for the implementation, like many of the automotive industry. And some big issue will be the data management. Who will be responsible for it? The municipalities, for example, or will the business case in the private sector? We don't know. And the regulation process as well. And the niche, the innovations that are related to automated road transport, 5G I already mentioned, sharing, and what is very important is the mobility as a service, so that we have these on-demand services and drive technologies like battery, who will complement then with the technology of automated road transport, automated mobility. Next, please. I don't know if I have time left. And so now you have to click a lot. So that's might try to show you how automated road transport can implement into the whole system. You have these landscapes and the regimes, for example, the science, culture, infrastructure, and so on. And the niche where the innovation happens, you can see we're talking about network, and such a kind of network is Art4, for example. We have this core think tank, and we're handling with applications, with impacts, scenario building, and all the questions about public space. So if we're doing that, then we have a chance to integrate into the whole innovation system. We have this failure of innovation, of course. And I have to go on. I see in the chat, you can click go on. And then maybe there is building a new regime with sensing and confidence in the system by the user acceptance. We have high duty mobile networks, and we can tackle this compatibility of urban, interurban, and rural structures. And all the questions regarding to liability and regulation will be solved. Okay, then go on. This is just means to conclude in a very funny way what is important. We have this implementation of autonomous vehicles, and then are coming the mixed traffic. In the left, you see the regulation process and all the challenges behind this. We can go on. We have to be very realistic in implementation. So not everything autonomous is autonomous. It's not self-driving. It's automated, and maybe in much of these, a lot of these pilots are an endorsement. So they are not really integrated in the whole traffic system. So if we can. That's very important for the future, and that's in industry and politics, see what is really happening, what is realistic. And level 5 autonomous is at this moment not realistic. So go on. So we have to involve in the industry, so the planners and the society, and Art4 is an example of the capacity building, so that everybody can involve. Go on, please. So, and the conclusion is the transition, depending from the ability is dependent on the regime level. We have these 4 big challenges on policy, legislation, infrastructure, technology, and consumer acceptance. And we have to be very realistic, and it takes a long time with a lot of failure and bias if we can whole implemented automated road transport. But it's very important to interact with all partners and all actors and stakeholders. And yeah, that's what from my side. Sorry for the inconvenience here.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Torben. I see there is a question in the chat on the effect of autonomous transport on rural urban economic disparities. With a view to timing, I would suggest maybe you can answer this question in the chat.
Yeah.
Afterwards. Thank you once more indeed for your contribution, and we stay with our next contribution in the field of mobility indeed. Because our next speaker is Gary Bosworth. He's a professor at Newcastle Business School of the Northumbria University in the UK, and his research focuses on rural and regional entrepreneurship and innovation. And Yeah, the title of your contribution, Gary, is Unequal Futures of Rural Mobility, Challenges for Smart Countryside and the First Mile. And we're very much looking forward to learning more on that from you, Gary. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you just remind me the time to aim for so that I can make sure we're on track?
Yes. Can we say, let's say 15 minutes approximately for your talk?
So I'll finish by 11:30 English time.
Right.
Thank you. That's
right.
fine.
Thank you.
Fine. Okay. Hopefully the screen sharing is working and title page is in view for everyone. So as per the introduction, yeah, I'm Gary Bosworth, recently joined Northumbria University from the University of Lincoln, where I was a colleague of Liz, who you've seen earlier. And this work relates to a project that we did last year with Charles Fox and Martin Collison, also at Lincoln, and a follow-up project that I'm involved with, where I should credit Jake Page, Giles Perkins, and Peter Ramsey of WSP, who are leading on Forms 2. Forms, by the way, stands for the Future of Rural Mobility study. So I can't say too much about the second study at the moment, as it's work in progress and still with the clients for feedback and approval, etc. And those clients are Midlands Connect, who look after the East and West Midlands regions here in England. Traditionally quite urban focused in their work, but recognising the need to integrate rural transport, rural mobility into their strategic thinking, and hence where these projects originated from. So just to frame the presentation today around this question of a smart countryside, we've heard about smart cities already. Smart countryside literature, going back to Lucia Naldi's work in 2015 in particular, and subsequently Bill Slee, who's published in 2018 there, is really focusing on the role of technology and innovation, but also, very importantly, the role of local communities, of social innovation, and how these two come together in a rural place. So it's not just that urban emphasis on knowledge, innovation, clusters, that type of smart growth we see in an urban region. That doesn't translate perfectly into more sparse economies. So understanding that role of the social is going to be quite important in the presentation here. And I think an interesting aside in the final bullet point, what is missing here a little bit, I think, is specifically the role of the environment, or the questions around climate change. I wonder if there's almost an innate assumption that if we're moving to electric, we're moving to smarter forms of mobility, then it's going to be better for the environment. But certainly I think we were a little bit guilty of not incorporating environmental issues into our work. And Grace and others, including Alistair Scott at Northumbria, have been writing about this sort of almost dichotomy between smart city and natural city ideas, which we're going to start trying to explore more in the rural context. So that's something to be aware of. So for the background, Forms 1, the study we did last year, essentially identified that there is a difference between urban and rural, which we know, but also there are, the rural itself, I would say, is more differentiated than the urban. You can design transport strategies for cities of different sizes, and then there's perhaps a lazy assumption by policymakers that we can then design a transport strategy for rural. But even in the Midlands region of England, you've got remote coastal rural, upland rural, suburban commuter rural, got market towns, you've got small villages, you've got very, very different user demands for transport that are spread out. So we can't just lump rural into one box and design one strategy. We know that rural communities have fewer transport choices, but it's not just about the communities, it's also about the businesses that are at times struggling to recruit and retain qualified employees. Transport is an issue for economic development as well. And this, I think one of the things that we really discovered is that the transport demand in rural areas is particularly fragmented. That's between the age group, the purpose of travel, the destinations they're going to, and actually the supply of that transport, whether it's voluntary transport for hospitals and healthcare, whether it's school transport, whether it's private buses, whether it's car shares and so forth. But there's a real fragmentation that made it quite difficult sometimes for people to know which transport was available for which purpose. And certainly it wasn't always joined up at key points to allow movement between modes or to simplify the choices of rural residents, or indeed people working or tourists going to rural areas. So that's something we really need to tackle in the rural, I think. And very much fitting with the theme today, mobility technology is unevenly distributed, and in part because of the digital divide that perpetuates in rural areas. And I'll come on to that again in a few moments. So to just go quickly through the next couple of slides, we took the stance in our research that rather than starting from some technology and thinking, how can this be rolled out into the countryside, we started by looking at rural needs and then trying to think, what are the solutions and where does technology fit into those solutions? We felt that was a more positive way of looking at the rural and actually trying to identify markets for mobility firms, for new initiatives and innovations to succeed and thrive. And in doing that, trying to overcome some of this fragmentation, we pieced together business and economy needs and social and community needs, and tried to paint a picture in this diagram that they're not actually miles apart from each other. So, you know, training and networks, businesses need them, but so do people. Affordable housing is important for communities, but it's important for businesses to have the right mix of people in the labour market. And I won't read through all of them, but we say trying to match those together, we see that we can actually tackle many needs, many mobility demands collectively. And one way of doing that, if anyone in the audience is linked to the MobiHubs project, I'm sorry I've been stealing your picture many, many times in the last year, but I have been referencing you each time. The idea of hubs is something we latched onto very early and was very much of interest to the stakeholders, the community representatives that attended our workshops and engaged in our research. And as I made the point here, these are social solutions just as much as they're technological solutions. It's about rural communities coming together and wanting to position community facilities, co-locate them, create a social space, which also gives them better access to transport and other forms of mobility. So out of those recommendations, the second project that we're midway through is trying to develop guidance for local authorities of how to create a network of rural mobility hubs. And in doing that, the stage is there. Stage one is not there because that was just an inception meeting, so I didn't think we needed to include that. But it's coming up with a typology, the characteristics of different locations, the identifying these different types of rural spaces, and then looking at the commercial considerations, because these have to be commercially viable, and then looking at the application of technology in the hubs for mobility, but also for things like co-working, maybe innovation hubs, maybe telephone triage for health appointments, maybe secure secure delivery lockers, but looking at those. But we start, what does the rural need? Can we make it commercially viable, whether private sector, voluntary led or whatever, but can we make it viable in the long run? And then where does the technology fit? We're developing guidance, and so we're at the point of creating a 15-step process chart to help practitioners run through a process of identifying optimum locations. So with just a few minutes left, I'll skip most of the rest of this page, except to say that within the hubs, it is about having multiple functionality, and it is about engaging communities in their design. And actually, no, the middle point's important, that it doesn't have to be a shiny, brand new thing like the image previously. It can be retrofitted around existing buildings. So with the last 5 minutes that I have, I just want to say a little bit more, setting it into some of the theoretical context of smart rural and smart rural futures, or smart countryside. Paul Cowie at Newcastle University with Leanne and Kuhn wrote a piece on the risk that rural areas will be left behind with the fourth industrial revolution. And out of our project, we wrote a piece on unequal futures. That's in the journal Local Economy, open access if you want to search for it. But what we both said is that rural areas risk being left further behind by technological innovation, and that current policy overlooks the potential for innovative solutions to be based on rural needs and to fit rural places first. And that's a real concern. The argument goes, well, this technology can help level things up. We've heard so much in the UK about a levelling up agenda between the north and the south. We're hearing it in the urban and rural context. It can do this, but will it do it is a whole different question. And one of the possible solutions is for rural communities to be more empowered to participate in the decision making. And we need to frame this smart rural thinking differently from smart cities. If we're chasing growth, innovation, and those sort of buzzwords, it isn't going to translate. So we need to think of it as social innovation, as the right technology with the right infrastructure. And with that infrastructure, we need to think about what is feasible in a rural space. We heard from Helen's talk earlier about these smart sensors everywhere. That's great in a city. Can we really do that for every household in the rural? Can we really have 5G connectivity on every single road so that if there's lift sharing going on, we can be paying through these micro payments? We can have the security that we know where somebody is. They've got that security of sharing a car with a potential stranger, let alone translating that into driving AI vehicles with complete internet connectivity at all times. So to do that, I'm sorry, you can see in the top corner Charles's book. I have to put that on every presentation as well, otherwise he'd be very upset. But he's the expert on the data side of things, but it is phenomenally powerful what we can do with transport data to plan different routes, as well as to enable these different apps, these different technologies to support very different modes and ways of thinking about traveling around. So to overcome the risk of a digital divide continuing, we need to think about how we get that infrastructure into our rural places. And we can actually rethink mobility itself too, because it's not just people getting to goods and services. It's not just goods and services getting to people, actually. We can deliver things differently. We're seeing that with the conference here today. We're seeing that with many more things going virtual. So we're in a period of rapid change, and I don't think we know quite what the next 1 year, let alone 5 years, will look like in this space. But one thing I think we can do for the rural, and I think this is my final main point, is learn from what's happened with the provision of broadband internet, where rural communities got together and bundled their demand in a way that attracted the private sector to provide the infrastructure. You convince the private sector there's money to be made, they'll provide the service. If they think it's remote and no profit, they're not going to be bothered. So communities can get together and bundle their demand in clever ways, okay? And one way of doing that is to create these hubs where not only is the spatial agglomeration of demand happening, but actually you can do it over time, because a family that's going in 3 different directions, a child to school and 2 parents in different directions to work, if all of their travel leaves within a 1 hour window, if you've got a comfortable hub where somebody can sit checking their email, somebody else can go and do 45 minutes in the gym, and the other one's on the first bus that leaves, actually that's a viable option for families. And it also builds that community spiritness in a rural space. But actually, we may not need to travel as much at all. We'll use the co-working space all day, or we'll find different ways of organising our lives. So that's where these hubs, as a social as well as a technological solution, become really quite exciting. So I'll leave you with a couple of questions, and that's that if smart relates to innovation and growth and knowledge, well, what does this really look like, and how do we translate it into a rural setting, and where does the environment sit within that? As I say, I didn't really touch on that today, but I think it's a fundamentally important question to come back to with the eco-economic options for rural growth that have perhaps been forgotten about in the last few months. And then the fundamental questions at the bottom, what is actually going to drive change? Will it be more COVID stuff? Hopefully not. Will it be going back to the climate emergency questions? Well, that seems to have been forgotten. We need to push on that. Will technology drive change, private investment, in which case it may be urban-led, or will rural communities really get in there and fight their corner and be part of this evolving mobility story for rural areas? So that's the challenge for the rural, I think. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for this excellent talk, Gary. And yeah, I think we have a lot of tasks for us to think about how to actually achieve this empowerment that you mentioned that is needed in rural communities, and also think about different ways to frame the smart rural futures. That was two points that I took away from your talk. I can see that there are also two questions to you, Gary, in the chat. Maybe you find the time during our next talk to reply on them. And
yeah, no problem.
Thank you once more very much, Gary.
Thank you.
We have one more speaker also joining us from the UK today, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Eliseo Villalta Perdomo. He's a senior teaching fellow at Aston University. And when we talk about resilient regions, it's of course not only smart city and mobility topics, but Eliseo's research really shows that brings in another valuable perspective to this discussion, and that's how can we actually strengthen regional innovation support capacity. So that's what Eliseo will tell us more about, and his talk is entitled Challenge-Based Learning Interventions to Increase Resilience in Rural Enterprises. The floor is yours, Eliseo.
Thank you for the introduction and the invitation to discuss this project. This is a pilot that is part of a project that is called COM3. This project involves Atene and Lincoln also, and is supported by the Interreg North Sea region. And the project itself is about the digital technologies and how to introduce these digital technologies in the rural areas, and how to support governments to do that. So we did a pilot, one of the 9 pilots, and this pilot is about the connection between education, academia, with businesses and government. So we are talking mainly about the triple helix of innovation. That is what we're talking about. So what we did is to consider the role that academia can do in the triple helix, because at the end of the day, when we talk about triple helix, it's very difficult to identify which is the main actor or which is the trigger of the actions. So in this case, what we are saying is one possibility of establishing this kind of innovation processes through the incorporation of students within the academies. So what we will discuss is particularly the concept of helix of innovation, but in a much wider perspective, because apart from including the traditional 3 elements, industry, government, and academia, we are also considering other aspects that maintain that support this framework of sustainability. So we introduce or include the civil society, and we also want to be interested in considering the environment. But for us, what is in the foreground of this project is students. And it's students because students participate actively in many intellectual activities, particularly they do assignments, they do exams, they do projects, and many of this is just based on artificial, well-bounded problems. So what we are saying is, well, if I have 200 million students around the world in the tertiary education in universities, why don't we make them to do something that could be useful for the community where they are? In the particular case of UK, we can consider that we have more than 2 million students. So rather than asking them to do small exams, why don't we ask them to do real projects that help and support the community? That's our main aim. So what we did was creating, that's not the case exactly, to take advantage of one of the many approaches that you can use for this. When we talk about projects and problems and things like that, there are many strategies that you can use. You can use what they call problem-based learning, where you define a particular problem and you ask the students to implement a set of specific tools, or you can do a project where you define very clearly the project, exactly what the project is about, and then the students have to solve this project. In our case, we look at this in a much more wider perspective, because what we think is that what we need is to connect the students with real world and helping and giving them the opportunity to recognize the challenges that are in their communities. And that's it. Don't giving them much more boundaries, because what we want is them to develop their own understanding and their own knowledge. Challenge-based learning is particularly based on 3 activities: what they call engage, what they call investigate, and act. In our case, what we do is we develop challenge-based learning for a particular module that is called operations management. And in this module, what we do is what we call a nano challenge. A nano challenge takes part of the process and makes students to work only in part of it. Why we do that? Because in our case, in the area of engagement, what we do is we work with the government and with businesses in the rural and urban areas. Lincoln is a small city in the east of UK that is well connected with the surroundings and it has many agricultural activities. So we connect them, we talk with them, and we develop together challenges related to how to introduce digital technologies. Then students proceed to do the investigation. They provide a set of different possibilities that can be used by these micro companies. Usually they are micro for their benefit. And then we go with the government. The expectation is if some companies are interested of the project, then we take the companies and the students and we put them in contact with the government, and they do what we call the action, the process of implementation and finding funding, etc. So what we have done is to break into 3 parts. The first part, engagement, is, even though is coordinated by academics, it is business oriented and are the businesses who run this part. Then in the section of investigation, there are the students who do that. And then in the action at the end, what we consider is the government. So each part in this triple helix has a role to play. In our particular case, what we did was to adjust this model by doing something that represents more or less the similar, but we connected with particular concepts that are important in operations management. In particular, we connected this with the key performance indicators that we usually consider in operations management, and we ask students to identify possible solutions that can improve at least one of these key performance indicators: cost, speed, dependability, quality, or flexibility. And the students then work during one semester on doing this. 2 of the examples that we have run in the past, the first one was with a big company, a multinational company, a defense company, and what we were trying to do was to check if the model would work with the students, which was the response of the students. The students had a conversation with a member of the staff of this company. This company works for defense. They have a particular set of equipment that is called brains. This equipment is used for analyzing data. Such data is generally used in missiles for identifying friends from foe. So it's a piece of, in some ways, artificial intelligence that is able to identify patterns, any kind of patterns of data stream, and is able to recognize based on those patterns to which is the course of action that should be done. They use it obviously for military equipment to identify silhouettes of airplanes, but you can use it for anything else because as is that analysis, you can identify any data stream. So you are able, with this equipment, you are able to recognize sophisticated things like who is the pianist that is playing a particular piece of music by listening how these pianists usually play. So you create some knowledge. The second, and then the students develop different solutions, 16 different solutions. Some of them have to do with aspects like identifying environmental problems or, for instance, recognizing the level of health in a particular group of animals in the middle of the jungle, or recognizing piracy in some parts of the world. So they were providing very, very clever and practical solutions that where this product could be used. The second project was done in spring. It's interesting because that project came just landed in our plate with the COVID. So at the beginning we were thinking, oops, who knows if that will work? But yes, students and everybody and the project itself moved into digital, and that's good because the project is about digitalization. So we were able to recognize these capabilities, and it was done with several organizations. These organizations are, you can see some of them. This is one micro business, one lad that has a car and he drives for weddings, etc. You have another organization like Back in Things that creates signs, road signs, or any kind of signs with 3D printing. So very different projects, from very, very micro ones that were working in things like food and beverage to extremely big ones that were in defense. So what we notice is that after doing this twice, we discovered that this kind of process can be used for very small businesses, for very big businesses in any kind of industry. So what we can say about using challenge-based learning and using this kind of approach for academia is that for students it's very important because they acquire experience, real experience about problems that they will find in the future. So we are preparing better our professionals. And to be fair, it provides a lot of contribution. It contributes a lot in terms of innovation, particularly for micro businesses, because as everybody knows, micro businesses don't have the amount of resources that are required to maintain R&D activity. So students can help them to identify which are the things where they have to be looking at. In terms of businesses, well, as we say, they have many advantages in terms of technology, but there are other activities that we didn't notice until they told us, and is that they were interested in this kind of process because it was a very good way for human resources to recognize which kind of students could be of interest to hire. So it was a very practical and effective way of doing it. And in fact, we have had a couple of students that are working now with the defense company, for instance. In terms of the government, it's interesting for them. They need, this is probably the most difficult part because they have very well structured activities and many of them know what they want to do. And what we need to do there is to help them to understand that they have a role of contributing in helping us to improve the interactions and making them easier. And finally, probably the most important thing is to recognize that academia has a very important role to play, more than just providing ideas. Probably they have to be triggers for innovation. And that is all I can say, because I think we don't have too much time. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Eliseo. Indeed, multi-stakeholder cooperation is a key for effective innovation in urban and rural areas. Our session has reached its end. I appreciate all our speakers, Helene, Eliseo, Gary, and Torben, for their valuable contribution. I'm happy that we could provide some insight to this debate through our session, and would very much look forward to catch up on this topic with all of you. Thank you very much, and take care.